Okay, let's jump right into this. For the very first time, OpenAI's Frontier Stack is actually going to live natively inside AWS's established procurement and governance paths. So if you're out there building, buying, or securing enterprise AI, this is literally a game changer. We're looking at a massive fundamental shift in how organizations will evaluate and deploy artificial intelligence from here on out.
Look, the barrier to putting AI into real, live production, it's rarely about model quality anymore, right? I mean, these models are incredibly smart. The actual roadblock is the red tape. It's audit, it's procurement, and it's governance. It's your security team demanding to know exactly how data is locked down, and your finance team freaking out over unpredictable costs. Well, this new development targets those exact bottlenecks head on, shifting the entire conversation from raw capability to absolute control.
So let's set the facts straight right at the top. On April 28, 2026, AWS and OpenAI announced a massive launch that brings OpenAI models, codecs, and managed agents directly into Amazon Bedrock. And to be clear, this isn't just some lightweight integration. This is a fundamental pairing of OpenAI's absolute frontier capabilities, yes, including GPT 5.5, with Amazon's battle-tested enterprise-grade infrastructure.
Now, it is super important to clarify upfront that while this includes those massive frontier models, everything in this announcement is currently stamped as a limited preview. We've got to separate the confirmed facts from the hype here. Broad general availability, the exact pricing, the rollout timelines across different regions, all of that is still entirely unclear. But make no mistake, the architectural shift this signals, it's massive.
Let's decode this stack, starting with Layer 1, the models. OpenAI models are now directly accessible right through Bedrock's familiar service surface. So if you're an enterprise team already using AWS to orchestrate your apps, this means you can access frontier models through the exact same interfaces and workflows you're already using every single day. It completely removes the need to spin up separate, siloed architectures just to get your hands on OpenAI.
Moving to Layer 2, we bring Codex into the fold. With over 4 million weekly users, Codex can now use Bedrock as its primary provider. OpenAI is really framing this as adding enterprise-grade attributes. What that means for you is you get the raw coding power that developers absolutely love, but it's completely wrapped up in the heavy-duty security, billing, and availability guarantees of AWS.
Then we hit Layer 3, which introduces Bedrock managed agents powered by OpenAI. AWS is pitching this as a radically faster, safer path to actually deploying agents. And we are not just talking about basic chatbots here. We're talking about sophisticated agents that maintain context, execute multi-step workflows, use very specific tools, and actually take action across your business processes. Both companies are hammering home the point that this is all about enterprise workflows, not just raw intelligence.
Now, the absolutely crucial point here is understanding the market incentives behind the scenes. For AWS, this is entirely about becoming the default control plane for enterprise AI. Think about it. If every single model call, every tool call, and every multi-step agent action flows directly through Bedrock, AWS completely cements its position as the indispensable foundation of your entire AI strategy.
AWS ultimately wins if they own these specific controls. They're specifically calling out things like identity and access management, private links network boundaries, standard encryption, and CloudTrail audit logs. The promise AWS is basically making to your security team is this. You don't have to go out and create some parallel security universe just to use the best models. You can just lean on the guardrails you already know and trust.
Flipping over to OpenAI's perspective for a second, this whole move directly targets the enterprise path of least resistance. You know the typical flow, right? It goes from a fun experiment to a completely grueling security review to a nightmare procurement cycle, and then, finally, maybe, to production. By living inside AWS, OpenAI dramatically shortens that cycle. Enterprise teams want the best models, but they want them inside the compliance workflows they already use.
And here it is, the absolute magic phrase for enterprise adoption. Apply usage toward AWS commitments. Basically, OpenAI gets a frictionless path where companies can just count their AI spending against the massive pre-negotiated AWS contracts they already have on the books. This practically eliminates the procurement friction that typically stalls AI projects for months on end. It is a massive, massive win for OpenAI's enterprise distribution.
Wait, hold on. Let's interrupt this hype train for a quick reality check. Announcements do not equal outcomes. It is incredibly easy to draw a slick diagram of a secure agent on a whiteboard. It is infinitely harder to run one reliably in a highly regulated enterprise without accidentally exposing sensitive data.
Remember that limited preview stamp we talked about?
Yeah.
In practice, that usually translates to highly limited regions, a handful of hand-picked beta customers, and guardrails that are, well, not quite mature yet. These promised enterprise-grade features might actually buckle under the weight of a complex legacy corporate network. We just don't know yet.
The skeptical reality we have to face is this. Until you can constrain these agent tools with absolute zero trust least privilege, until you can prove they are completely reliable, and until you can perfectly predict costs so your finance department doesn't pull the plug in week 2, this is just a directional shift. It is not a solved problem. The burden of proof is still entirely on AWS and OpenAI to actually show this works at real scale.
Okay, moving past the hype, if you're an operator or a tech leader tuning into this explainer, you need an action plan. Here are the immediate practical questions your architecture and security teams need to be asking first thing Monday morning to evaluate this shift. You really need a checklist to navigate this effectively.
First, your teams absolutely must confirm exactly where the audit logs live and if those identity boundaries actually hold up. Second, your procurement folks need to officially verify if this new spend actually attaches to your existing AWS commits. Third, architecture needs to know if tool calling agents can be locked down with super tight approval scopes. And finally, critically, your product teams need to start treating agent governance as a primary roadmap deliverable, not just a nice-to-have afterthought.
But let's be real about the fundamental shift happening here. Your vendor conversation is now forced into a strict binary choice. Do we use OpenAI direct, or do we use OpenAI via AWS? Make no mistake, these are two wildly different operational paths with completely different security postures, trade-offs, and lock-in dependencies.
Exactly. And because of that stark binary choice, your practical next step should be writing out a formal risk register for your very first Bedrock agent. You need to map out the specific tools, the data sources, the necessary human approvals, and define the absolute least privilege IAM policies. For example, say you're building an agent that can read a document store. Well, it needs to be strictly cryptographically blocked from ever writing data or sending out external emails.
Take a prototype workflow, like a standard IT ticket triage agent. It ingests the ticket, classifies the issue, and drafts a response. Simple enough. But critically, before it ever files that ticket or emails the user, it hits a hard, human-approved gate. This forces a human in the loop before any autonomous agent touches your production data or communicates externally. That right there, that is what real governance looks like in practice.
So my final take on all this is that it represents a real, highly tangible path to production inside an enterprise control plane. This isn't just about showing off a smarter model anymore. It's about forcing advanced AI to behave like normal, governed, boring enterprise software. But as we've established today, it still has to prove it can deliver that governance, that rock-solid reliability, and that cost control securely at massive scale.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this crucial question to take back and debate with your team. If you're an enterprise buyer, do you want OpenAI via AWS or OpenAI direct? And why?